and welcome back to Getting to the Top, where I interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey. Today, I have the absolute delight of introducing you to Antoinette Vermilye. She's passionate about the complex interrelationships of the ocean, plastics, gender, and overfishing on social injustice, human health, and the environment. She seeks coalitions to find action-oriented solutions, and she has come up with quite a few that will have far-reaching impacts downstream, or to take action on identified gaps where little or no attention is being paid. In this context, she's worked with migrant refugees. She has helped to create a Twitter campaign to tweet airlines on their policies of carrying shark fins as cargo. She co-created an organization that I'm a huge fan of, She Changes Climate, and that was to get the UK, Egyptian, and UAE Conference of the Parties leadership. So that's a huge conference by the UN on climate change, to include equal gender representation at the top so that balanced and inclusive policies trickle down to all policies. She created WTF, Where's the Fish? It's a campaign to empower citizens to add their voices to civil action against overfishing and unsustainable fishing. And the list goes on. I love the fact that she's passionate. I love the initiatives that she's created. I love the waves that have been, no pun intended, have been created by the initiatives that she has been a part of. And this is really why I'm doing this. It is about making an impact and having a perspective as a leader, and looking at your leadership journey from the difference you have the ability to make, both in your own life as well as in the lives of others. So welcome, Antoinette.
Hi there, Racquel, and thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad that we at last connected. So thank you.
Yes, I had to admit to her that I was chasing her for a little while, so I'm really glad that I've gotten a chance to talk to her. So Antoinette, you know, you've done all of these incredibly amazing things, but I really want to understand, where did it start? What was your first interest? What did you think you would do when you grew up?
Oh gosh, not this, but okay. So actually, this is an important point, and we have to go back to this. All of us as young kids are much more closer to ourselves, our true selves. I think of our lives as onion layers that we build on as we grow up. So whatever you wanted to be as a kid, there was something in it that actually I find is the thread that comes through to where I was now. So I always wanted to protect animals. That was, I grew up by the ocean. I grew up actually in West Africa. And I used to just be fascinated. And also I was a pretty loner of a kid. So much of my time was just spent observing nature and just watching interactions between creatures, how they cut leaves, how they dug holes, how they interacted with each other. And I think at the end, that was the thing that became my overarching goal. But remember something in life, and this is something I always tell people, is we have an ideal, but to get there, we have to go through pragmatic steps, like maybe making money in order to live. So we can't ignore that fact. And so I don't think anyone should, we have to be realistic about this. And in one of the other things that we do, we actually sponsor scholarships for social entrepreneurship at the London Business School. But the idea is, when we take scholars from other NGOs or from the Global South, is our aim, is that after, when they graduate, the aim is, don't go straight into NGOs, go work, make your money, but always think about what you got, think about where you can pay it forward, think about the moment when you will be ready to do that. So I think it's what I call like you're hopping along. So that was my thing. Right now, I always knew I wanted to do something where I'm a fierce defender of injustice and of those who do not have a voice to speak. So what I try and do is use my voice or my body as a vehicle in order to represent or call attention to those issues, and if I can affect change. So that has always been the thread that ran through my life. I have to admit that on the way I went off and I worked in organizations that had nothing to do with that, but on the side we were doing things.
No, but tell me, so you were interested in animals, you wanted to protect them. West Africa, where in West Africa?
Nigeria.
Oh, wonderful. I love
Yeah,
Nigeria.
me too.
Oh,
That's where
yeah.
my heart is. Africa
That's where
is
my belly is. That's where my
yes,
belly is. Oh, I
is where
love
the music
the
comes from.
food.
When I hear music, whenever I'm in a concert and, you know, these classical concerts, everyone's sitting there very, I can't help but just move because that rhythm came through me. It's joy, it's love, it's love. That's the
It
point.
is, it is. I think both food and music are love, and for me, definitely Africa is it.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, so you're growing up and you want to protect animals. So then what is the first sort of career that you think about coming out of that need to protect animals?
So originally, ironically, I wanted to be an actress. I was like, I'm going on the stage. I'm going to use that because I can use my voice. And that's interesting. Even at a young age, I realized the power of influence, that if you had a voice where you could affect change or influence change, that would be great. The reality was that I ended up going to Switzerland to learn French, and then I ended up staying there. I worked for an international trade organization for the airlines. I was doing marketing, communications. But again, one of the things, I've never done something that I didn't feel I could do some good for. So the
Mhm.
communications thing was quite an interesting one because I could always channel it in discrete ways to find sustainability, to find less polluting, to find, of course, then I learned about aviation. In fact, I was one of the first to hear about the CO2 emissions from airlines, and I was totally shocked. So in the meantime, whilst we were doing that, whilst I was earning money, we started making, my husband and I, documentaries on the socio-political, economic impact of humankind on the ocean and the ocean on humankind. And that could have taken the form of just different stages like medicine, like deep sea bed mining, like all the explorers, all the ancient explorers, from the Polynesians, the Portuguese, the British, the you know, just going around looking how their journeys that they had done. So every one of them was the military, the power of the sea in increasing power throughout the world, colonization, unfortunately. But these are important issues that as you start to delve deeper into anything, you start to realize that what seems like a very succinct little sentence becomes a very nuanced, very deep, and a lot of history had been overlooked, such as the impact of colonization, which is a huge impact on climate change. So that was one of the areas that had always been at the back of my mind. And therefore, that's when we came much later on to create She Changes Climate. It was like, this is the moment. So a lot of what we're doing in life, and this is what I often say, when you see a little baby and they're born, they're wide-eyed and they're looking around. That's what I call the data input stage. Everything is being absorbed. But actually, in reality, that doesn't stop. Throughout our lives, we're getting signals, and those signals are feeding in. And eventually, there'll come a moment in your life when you'll go, this is where it will be output.
Yeah.
And so that is when I realized, oh, that's the moment where we can start making an impact or doing something about that in a small way.
But that's such an interesting point, because I think that a lot of people along their careers are, you know, like, if you have to take a different position, or if you take a lateral step instead of a step up, they see it as a potential mistake. But the thing is, I have done so many different things, and sometimes it is, yes, I need to feed my family and I'm going to do this job. And there are certainly in this role, I realize all of those experiences have come together full circle. And everything that I have learned along the way is very, very valuable to exactly what I need to know and need to do right now.
I totally agree with you. And maybe it's the um, the spectrum of the age I'm at now, but I wish I'd known that when I was younger. I wish I'd just trusted that sometimes. A friend of mine said something really interesting. She said, don't always battle to fill up all your time and everything for what you think you want to do, because sometimes you need to leave space for the universe to show you where you can go. And I remember thinking that I have in my life certain epiphanies where I go, oh, that is so true. You suddenly go, and it changes your outlook on everything. It means that sometimes I just have to, when you're in a current, just let's see where it's taking you instead of always fighting it so hard.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. And
so
that's the thing, huh? And sometimes, sometimes, I've said this about, and I've like you, I figured this out way too late, but like I'll miss a flight, and a lot of things went wrong to allow me to miss a flight. And in that moment, I'm angry and I'm frustrated, and I don't see the universe is doing something and it's trying to put you in a particular place at a particular time. Just be open and understand that the universe is going to do what it's going to do, and just be ready. And every time I have been open and ready and said, okay, this is what's happening today. This is where I'm meant to be. I will be here and I'll be ready for whatever presents itself. Something amazing has happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I actually met Michael Bloomberg that way.
So you see, actually, it's funny. Let's go back again to kids. When we used to go, wasn't there that fun fair rides where you'd go on a little boat and everything was full of excitement and surprises would come out. So you actually enter those things with what's going to happen next, but you do it with joy as opposed to frustration and anger and everything, which adds so much stress to us. Whereas sometimes it's like, just see where you are being taken and see what you can read. It's not always going to be brilliant, but sometimes it is. And I think we have to be open to not always controlling every step of our lives, because that's where we start to close the doors and we start to close our lens and we start to close our eyes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because it's not that the opportunities go away, but your ability to see them in that moment when you are not open and aware, you're not curious. You were talking about you going into the fair. As children, we're far more curious. And I actually feel like that thing that you're saying about what you want as a child is your true nature. And that is, to stay aware of how all of the things that you're involved in and all of the opportunities that present themselves, how do they bring you back full circle to that initial purpose that you had, that you can then now execute on because you've had all of these experiences. But it does require a certain level of openness.
Exactly. And don't you find that actually you are drawn more to people with an open spirit?
Absolutely.
We are naturally, when you come across someone with you like go, oh, okay, fine. Well, they're just in that very narrow lens, and you already start to, feel that you have to shut down all the things that you might want to say or explore with them. So suddenly our world, instead of it being multi-dimensional, becomes very, very quickly one-dimensional. So everyone loses out. So I always think that that's that kind of like, we have this treasure box that we're not really using. And I love now challenging myself. Sometimes when things do go belly up, instead of going, which of course naturally we will do for a bit, then you go, okay, so where are you taking me? Where's this going?
Yeah.
And
what's the next adventure? Yeah. I've got a really good girlfriend who is like, she's like the Pied Piper for children. And she's like, children are so drawn to me. Like wherever she goes, the kids find her. And, and she's just like, what is it with these children? I don't have any children. I don't know why children are always drawn to me. I said, it's your openness. It is that you present this sense of wonder, and they see that similarity in you as an adult. And so many of us as adults don't have that. And so they're drawn to you.
I agree with that. I also, the other side of me, which is always, so when I'm working with particularly with the environment, I always go back to I do a lot of we go out onto excursions, and whether it's in a forest where we're taking kids out for walks, or on the ocean, swimming in the ocean, or snorkeling, or even just anyone on the side of the road. They stop and they see, in California you see the whales going by, so you just see their plumes as they and people stop and are in wonder. And I always go back and I think, as kids, we always stop in wonder at nature. We learn to stop and appreciate it. And then what is that stage? What is that food processor machine that we go by, that suddenly we completely cut off from that and go, oh, it's a thing, it's a resource, it's stock, it's and it's like, why do we do that when we had this compassion that was built in us, and we switch off that button? So I think very much my new belief, particularly with She Changes Climate, and probably my very my own personal opinion, is the world is the way it is because we don't have more women leaders. And I think
fully agree.
If the world had been
Agree.
run by women, we wouldn't be in this situation. I'm sure that some people are going, no, but I actually believe, because women tend to think more long-termism, they're much more, they're thinking holistically, generally. Where are we looking at all the allies, or as I had said, gallies, to speak up for them and say, so-and-so hasn't spoken, or, oh, hang on, I think that so-and-so was saying something before Mel interrupted her. Can we just listen to what she had to say? We need to rally around each other to protect each other. And we've seen that technique working already with harassment, with bullying. So why not we need to change the way we conduct business meetings. This whole professional, going to come in with a tie and be very formal and everything. No, we should be saying a prayer blessing at the beginning. We should be asking everyone, check in. We should be being human, not inhuman. We're not robots. And the fact that we think we are behaving like robots is why we're so disconnected from everything that's happening right now in the world.
I completely agree. I think it's so important. And you're preaching to the choir when you're talking about, if we had a more inclusive world, would we have different outcomes now? And I'm so fundamentally entrenched in that I worry about us thinking about how do we create, Planet 2.0. But we're going about it in very much the same way, with very much the same people, leading in very much the same style. And that is going to take us back to exactly the same place, or it's going to create a new set of issues that we're having to solve 100 years from now. So we have to think about inclusivity, because that difference of opinion, that varying perspectives, that different lived experiences, it's going to give us a whole new way of approaching the challenges we face. When you have somebody who is different saying, but wait a minute, what is the impact of that on Indigenous communities, on, the long-term health, on the things that we truly care about and need to live so that we can live as well.
Have you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
I haven't yet.
The reason why is it's, again, a whole load of males getting together, really excited about the technological and physicist problem of smashing an atom to create the atom bomb, and then realizing, oh shit, what have we done? And actually in it they feature Einstein, and I often quote him because, as he says, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Let's now apply that to all the decision making, or most of it. If it's mainly a male patriarchal view, which has been, not necessarily, this is not to demonize men, but that they've been trained to think, this is how I must be, this is how a male must be. So I think what it is I allow for Gaia principles, which is saying, open your heart to more than that. You don't have to be that dominant. And if we look at nature, what is the richness of nature is all about biodiversity. And that's where we get the richness in what the world, the planet has produced. Imagine
Exactly.
we bring in all that different biodiverse thinking into our decision making, and it would be very different. And the other thing is, and I'll just so this is just an example. There's a woman, Caroline Criada Perez, who wrote The Invisible Woman. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't.
It's basically that society is built with around a male world, and women are the secondary gender. And it's not done with malice. It's just done because test dummies for cars were all done for men. You know, so if you're a little Vietnamese woman who weighs, you know, I don't know, 50 kilos or 40 kilos, the impact of a car crash is going to be far worse on you for your airbag than it is to be on the test dummy, which was a strapping guy of I don't know how many feet tall and weighing so much. Medicine is basically the doses were used to be based on a male. Now at last they're learning to. So we was actually being overdosed.
There's even reproductive health studies that were conducted on men.
Yes.
Which you know, it boggles the mind.
So again, now this comes to one of my major points in life, and this is one of my life lessons. I always say to myself, if whatever you're doing, does it make sense? Just because someone tells you this is this, you know, you have to go, but does that make sense? And they should keep coming back to you. And you need to keep asking until you fully understand. So, you know, I had a story. It's actually quite a dramatic one. My daughter, when she was about 19, was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, which was devastating. And I'm sure it would be for any family. And so I was like, okay, it's an inoperable brain tumor. So what happens if it gets bigger? We'll have to operate. So what are you saying? That
so then it's not inoperable
brain tumor, but you're going to have to operate. So what do we do in the meantime? And that was a key moment in my life when I went, just because you're wearing a white coat doesn't mean you're right or wrong. It just may be your opinion, but I need to triangulate what you're saying with other people. So I went down this huge, I mean, I was fighting to save my daughter's life. There's no more compelling incentive than that. And I researched and I started learning so much. I went worldwide on Facebook saying to any friend of mine, this is a situation, who knows someone who can help. And then I come back with, of course, snake oil solutions, but then I came across some interesting ones. And when they were interesting, it was like, okay, this looks interesting. How do I check with so and so, two other reputable sources that this is a real a valid solution? I mean, it was just one of those incredible things. But again, common sense is not common. That's one of my mother's saying. And I always think, oh, she's so right about that. And so you always have to say, if I don't get it, if I don't understand why I'm doing this, then I need to be true to myself. I have to say, either I can't do it, or you have to explain to me in such a way that I do understand. And we are very guilty of going, because we see everyone else doing something, that we go, oh, yes, tick, or, you know, we go along with it. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know, I don't understand, and it's your duty to explain to me so that I do understand.
That is absolutely brilliant and makes so much sense to me. And, you know, I can think of so many instances where someone gave me either advice or said something to me, whether in a position of authority, like you go to an attorney and they're like, well, this is the law. And initially I was like, well, okay, well, then we're going to have to find something else. We're going to have to do this a different way because the law says this can't be done. And I'm like, wait a minute, send me the law. Send me the statute that says that this can't be done. And they're like, well, no, there's no statute. And I was like, so then how is it law? And then it's like, well, in practice. And I'm like, well, practice isn't law. Practice is just habit. And it is that willingness to question authority and find your own truth that will help to propel us from where we are, because the entire construct that we're in wasn't built for us. And so unless we are questioning that construct, whenever we are presented with a barrier, we're going to keep sort of operating in this very small box that says, listen, we're trying to get the same outcomes that we've always had, versus, wait a minute, I reject this box. There are other things outside of this box. And I think that's such great advice and such a great perspective to have. And, you know, so incredible, because you trust people and they will be giving you their opinion as though it's law.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So tell me what happened with your daughter. I must know.
I found probably the best surgeon in the world, and he did the operation. I'm grateful that we were able to do that. And she's fine. She's 6 years on, completely free. But, you know, it was one of those situations where I was like, oh my gosh. And what I learned along that way, which again, is I'm like a dog with a bone. But there are many people who are very frightened about this journey. So I also understood and recognized that many people are very frightened of challenging, particularly obviously the medical authority, because that's their lifeline. And it's like someone throwing you a lifeline and saying, well, actually, I'm not sure I want that lifeline. And, you know, so I understand that as well. So again, it's with compassion and it's with empathy for those who have been in similar situations, but have had to take different paths. We also do what we need to do for our own mental survival. So again, but that was that story. But no, I agree with you, and I love what you're saying, because I think it is so important that we realize this. The other issue that you've raised, which is very important to me, and this is one of the things we have with She Changes Climate. Do we work within a system that is already weighted in favor of what exists? Of course, those who hold on to power don't want to let go. Or do we work outside of the system and create our own system? But that's actually quite difficult as well. So it's one of these stories of, as She Changes Climate, that's a struggle. I'll be totally honest. It's a struggle we have. Mm-hmm. We work within COP, within a very, very weighted system, and particularly COP28, which is increasingly worrying in the fact that the host is going to increase their oil and gas expansion whilst focusing on renewable energy at the same time. It's almost like, I'm going to spend more so that I can offset it, so therefore I'm okay, despite the fact that we're up here in greenhouse gas emissions. So that's, you
know, it's funny that when people think about, and sorry to cut you, but when people think about where we are and that we're talking about 1.5 additional warming, like, you know, we are aware of the problem. We're like, okay, we're all on fire, and like, listen, we're just going to heat you up just another 1.5 degrees, instead of saying, let's put out this fire. Let's try that. And that what we are negotiating isn't the reduction, but it is only warming to an additional degree, after already acknowledging that what's happened so far is already too much. It's crazy to me when I sit down and think about where we are and what we are negotiating based on where we are. It's almost as though we're not hearing ourselves in this moment.
Now, that's an interesting point that you make. I struggle with this, and I'll explain to you why. Is, you know, I do a lot of on LinkedIn. I'm often, my subjects are very eclectic, but they all link to the climate and to the planet. Mm-hmm. And you have people talking about net zero. We need to hit net zero. We need other people who want to do carbon drawdown. You have other people who say, oh, it's industry. No, it's the consumer. No, it's this. No, it's that. And it's kind of like, I realize, even myself, and I have to confess to that, what can I do? Okay. that can make a difference. So this is where my big message is to everyone. We all, if I do something, someone's going to say, but you're wearing this, or you took a plane, or you did this, you know, there's all this equivalence. But the fact is that if everyone does something, it's nearly what are we, 8 billion, 7.5 billion people? That would be huge. And that would have an impact on markets. It would have an impact on economy, this ridiculous chase for GDP, which is growth on a planet where there is a finite room. If you filled up a room with balloons and you keep filling them up and up and up, and you try and live in there, when they get full, that's where we're at now. We have no more wiggle room. And so I think at the end of the day, I also struggle with this. It's how do you do this? So my approach, and with She Changes Climate and with Gallifrey, we try multi-pronged approaches, because much of the time we're trying to help people feel that they are part of something, that it's not hopeless. And it isn't hopeless. I will tell you, yesterday I was talking to a woman and she said, well, I've been working on climate thing, and tell me one good thing that has happened. And I said, one, I can tell you four. I'll tell you that, the Hawaii state stopped shark fishing completely. The US has banned the import and export of shark fins, as has the UK. We don't realize it, but those are carbon. The more sharks we remove, up to 250 million sharks from the ocean each year. Keeping them in the ocean is actually carbon sequestration. One. Two, we've got the Global Plastic Pollution Treaty, which is being negotiated under the United Nations Environment Program to finish next year. Once the terms of that are passed, they have to be ratified by each nation. That will reduce our plastic pollution, which we're all seeing everywhere. Now, let's take that back down to us as an individual. What can I do? I don't want plastic pollution. Try and avoid plastic. I'm not going to say everyone can. We don't all have time. But whatever we can do. So those are the kind of things or do I have to take a car? I know everyone, particularly in the US, they're just, what is public transport? Use it, make it, or bike, or walk. Gosh, good for our health. Don't eat meat, or at least don't eat meat or fish.
Every day.
Every day. And that's the point. So I'll just, sorry, I don't want to go on too long, but an interesting story with one of our scholars who was from Nigeria. We did a dinner with our scholars, and we were talking, and I said, today we're serving a vegan meal because of the planet. And I just think you all need to, at best you can realize you can actually eat a really good meal. And at worst, well, you've just had a meal that's not so good. And I was sitting next to my Nigerian scholar who I adore. He's such a sweetie. And I said, well, what did you think? And he said, Antoinette, the salad, well, salad is for rabbits, And I said, okay, fine. And he said, but it was a mushroom risotto. And he said, that was really good. He said, but let me tell you, if I go back to Nigeria and I gave my mother a meal without meat, she would go back to her village and say, look at my son who's in the UK, who's doing all of these things, and he serves me a non-meat meal. And I started laughing, and I said, you and I both grew up around the same time. So when you were young, how often did you have meat? And he looked at me, he went, very rarely. I said, it's social status. All it is, it's a marketing thing to make you feel you can afford to have meat. We don't need it. We don't need it. And so therefore, make it a luxury again. Make it special. Make a fish. And in fact, now let's go back to the San people in South Africa, who whenever they kill a creature, they make a blessing and they thank it for giving up its life so that we can live. And I think, I know the vegan thing and cruelty to animals, I'm very much a proponent for, but I have to be pragmatic. I think at the end, if nothing else, if we take the time to appreciate what is on our plate and the effort that has gone into creating it, starts building that connection back to what matters.
Yes.
Back to your food, love and food.
Yeah. And you are what you eat. So make it count and waste less food. And I think you're absolutely right. We keep acting as though there is only one solution. So anyone who suggests anything other than what one person suggests is wrong. But it is going to take, we didn't get into this because of one thing. We got into this because of a lot of different things. And so there are lots of different strands that are going to need to come together to solve this issue. But talking about staying curious and always questioning and challenging the status quo, as well as understanding that nature means for us to be diverse, that is in fact the superpower of our planet. And who are we to question the superpower of our planet by not accepting the fact that diversity in nature is what gave us life? And, you know, this is why we're not allowed to sort of mate with close relatives, because you need diversity. It's important. And we need it in all aspects of our lives. And we need it in leadership as well. And that's really, really important. I thought you had such great suggestions for us. But I want to close and ask you for what else, if you are talking to somebody about their career, what would you recommend to them?
Okay, so I'm going to I mentioned them along the way, but the first one is, so get a group of allies, gallies, as I call them. So I think that's really important. And we've actually suggested this for She Changes Climate as well, is, you can join the movement, and it's basically where we will be, we want to be a conduit, not a voice, but a conduit for people who are on the front lines of climate change, and get them to the leaders so that their voices are heard direct, not diluted, not represented, not anything. But so your gallies are, I'm in a job where I'm doing this and I'm getting these challenges. Find other women who are like-minded and start creating a small WhatsApp group or whatever, so that you can exchange views, you can vent your frustrations, other people can come with things. You'd be amazed how supportive and how it makes you feel you're not alone, because we often do feel alone. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is what I had said about triangulating your information. So I think it's really important, if you come across anything, it doesn't make sense, go check yourself, check the information, triangulate. And if the resources that you're using don't corroborate it, have your antenna up. You just need to be sure. It gives you a sense of self-confidence of, okay, I know I am on solid ground. And as I keep saying, what man ever said he has imposter syndrome? But how many women do? Don't. This is how you will overcome your imposter syndrome. I know probably more than you do. So that's the other thing. The other thing I wanted to say is, don't be afraid of failure or humiliation. This is something that we're trained, and actually when you embrace it, we had a young woman working for us, and she does improv comedy. Oh my God, how many jokes fell flat? And she would be up there in front of an audience doing it. And I thought, now that is courage. Yeah. So the point is, what happens? The day goes by, people move on. You may be humiliated, but so what? You moved on. You lived. And that's the point. You survived. Exactly. Yeah. And failure is one of the ways that we learn. We have to understand that not everything we get. We're not superstars. I'm sorry. Let's be realistic. We're not all superstars. We all have a superpower. That I agree, and I totally support that. And we have to find it. But the most important thing is, don't be afraid of failure, because you tried. And you have to try. Without trying, we will never know. So I'm always very keen on that. So I think that. And then my final one is trust your gut. So I'm reading this book by a woman called Julia Enders called Gut. Basically, how the microbiota in our stomach affects the chemistry in our brain. So the idea of your gut instinct is actually quite real. So when in doubt, when you're having to really you have to sit there and you do all the, I often laugh about this. My son said one time, I was looking at getting a replacement car or whatever. And he said, well, if you want to do, and he gave me all the technical reasons and everything like that. And I said, I want the red one. No, it wasn't. I mean, I'm just being silly about it. But the point I'm just trying to say is check yourself against all these charts and everything that say what you should do and what you should be. They may be a guide, but they may also be a very good indicator when your instincts are going, no, I don't want to go that way, because then they become a sounding board. So
Yeah.
just listen to that and then ask yourself, what is it in me that is rebelling against that information? Because sometimes it may be there's something else. Obviously, you have to be honest with yourself, but it's important. So that's what I would. Those are my triangulate, failure of humiliation, failure or humiliation. Trust your gut and gallies. So
Love
I gave
it.
you.
I love it. I love it. I love it all. And this was far more of a climate conversation than I thought we would have, but I'm delighted because, you know, once we start talking climate, that's the thing that gets me jumping out of bed in the morning. And so it's the thing that I'm going to respond to. But I do want to say thank you so much, Antoinette, for such a riveting conversation. And also to point out for, you know, this is a whole new frontier, climate. And this is an opportunity for us to build diversity into it from the ground up. So it's a really interesting area for diverse candidates, for women, for people of color to get into. And it's also an opportunity for us to create an even more magical new world. So I am delighted to be on this journey with you. Thank you so much for sticking through to the end with us. And we look forward to seeing and talking to you next time. If you have any recommendations for our guests or any questions, please put them in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you next time. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for being with us on Getting to the Top. Bye.
Thank you so much.